Welcome everybody to BookEnds Online Edition. It's produced by Wadena County Historical Society and Travel & Story Seller in collaboration with New York Mills Regional Cultural Center. BookEnds is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a grant from the Five Wings Arts Council, thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. BookEnds programs from previous authors are now available on the website of the Wadena County Historical Society at www.wadenacountyhistory.org. Today's program will also be available on the website shortly. This month's speaker is Jo Severson. Julie is a versatile journalist, editor, and author of the brand new local guidebook, Secret Twin Cities, a guide to the weird, wonderful, and obscure. She is based in the Twin Cities and specializes in feature writing for local magazines, nonprofits, and small businesses. She is also available to work with individuals to record, transcribe, and shape their life stories and family heritage information into written legacies for future generations. Next month's bookend will be Saturday, June 12th. It will feature Carrie Mesrobian. If you have questions for today's author, feel free to enter them through chat. If you'd like to order her books, you may do so through our bookseller, Travel & Story Seller at gmail.com. Now, let's welcome to BookEnds Online Edition, Jo Severson. Hi, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for reaching out and inviting me to be part of this wonderful program. I've taken a look at some of your other guests you've had, and such an interesting lineup you've had, so a real honor. I'm ashamed to say I've never been to Wadena before, but I do know of it as sort of home to lots of beautiful parks and loads of history and lots of murals, right? Yes, once referred to it as the home of the world's largest picture puzzle. But I do have a slideshow today, a kind of short one. I'm not a very long-winded person, but to give you a sort of a behind the scenes glimpse at a small portion of what's featured in the book. But before I do that, I thought I would talk a little bit about my background as a Minnesota girl, and a very devout one, and as a writer, and what led to this oddball, quirky project. So although I moved around a bit in my 20s, I consider Minnesota my forever home. It was also the forever home for both my parents, both sets of my grandparents, and both sets of my great-grandparents. So my Minnesota roots run deep. I currently live in a northwest suburb of Minneapolis with my husband of 25 years. And we have 3 kids, ages 20, 18, and 15. I was born in St. Cloud, but I spent my elementary years growing up in Duluth with my 8 siblings. We lived on a small lake called Pike Lake, across from a great big apple orchard and down the road from a giant gravel pit. Our parents worked long hours, so my 8 siblings and I were one another's best friends. We had a very creative childhood. I was always writing. I was born to do that. I was always journaling and spying on my siblings, and I would write a family newsletter reporting on on all their doings. And I would write plays, and I would make my brothers and sisters perform in them for my parents, and wrote poems. My mom is a poet and a storyteller as well, so I grew up with that. I loved growing up in Duluth, but I always dreamed of moving to the Twin Cities. With such a big family, we never got to take vacations. The only vacations we ever took were to the Twin Cities. In particular, we would always come to the state fair every year. My grandpa showed horses there till his mid-80s. And then we'd stay at the Holiday Inn, and those were our big annual outings. And we would travel in 2 cars and talk to each other with walkie-talkies. Or my dad finally bought a school bus. He somehow found a pink school bus, and we would travel in that. So it was real fun. I just always thought Minneapolis was all that. That's where we always went to. And I also always dreamed of moving to Minneapolis because I was a huge Mary Tyler Moore fan. That's who I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to work in a newsroom like her. I wanted to live in a big studio apartment like her. And I wanted to have a best friend named Rhoda, just like her. And I figured that if I moved to Minneapolis, I could make all that happen. And finally, in 7th grade, my dream came true. My dad got a new job at Control Data and we relocated. And I ended up graduating from Minnetonka High School and went on to earn my BA at the College of St. Benedict in St. Joseph, Minnesota, where I declared myself an English major. I spent my 4 years practically living in the newsroom there, eating pizza, pulling all-nighters, working my way up to the editor-in-chief position. I had some really big assignments during that time, and my biggest was interviewing Patty Wetterling in her home on the 1-year anniversary of Jacob's abduction, which occurred during my junior year, down the road from our campus during my junior year. And that interview with her in Jacob's home had a huge impact on me, and so did my whole 4 years in that newsroom. And although I've never worked in an actual newsroom since then, every job I've had, whether it's been as a freelance writer or working for a publishing company or a school district, has always revolved around journalism and telling and preserving local stories. I currently work as a freelance journalist. I also have a love for creative nonfiction. I write mini memoirs. It's kind of a hobby of mine. I sometimes post some on my blog, Carvings on a Desk, that I started in 2015, which has led to all kinds of open doors for me, including my first book, Here in the Middle, which is an anthology written by people of the sandwich generation. I co-authored and edited it and contributed a story to it. It features those of us who are caring for our parents, aging parents and our children at the same time. So kind of circle of life stories. Anyway, the opportunity to write Secret Twin Cities fell in my lap. It came about, I've been a member of the Twin Cities Writing Studio since 2015. And the co-founder of that, Julie Burton, received a phone call from the publisher, Reedy Press. They were looking for a writer in Minnesota to write a book like this. And over the years, she had gotten to know my interests and my Minnesota ties, and she knew this was a project I would take and run with. I gravitate toward kind of the quirky side of life. I inherited that from my father, and I do have a deep love for the history of Minnesota. So it was a perfect gig for me, and I did take and run with it. The publisher had me write a couple sample chapters. They loved it, and they sent me a contract. And I'm happy to say that I just signed a second contract with them to write another book on the Twin Cities. This one will be called The Oldest Twin Cities, A Guide to Historic Treasures. And so I'm heavily working on that right now. I've got a long ways to go. It'll come out early 2023. So maybe I can come back and visit you then.
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that. It's been really rewarding. So I guess I'll just move on to the book now. For those of you who haven't maybe seen the cover, Secret Twin Cities, A Guide to the Weird, Wonderful, and Obscure. In a nutshell, it's a medley of 90 vignettes, I call them, with photographs, loaded with photographs also, that feature those offbeat and underappreciated places in the Twin Cities that really bring the uniqueness of the Twin Cities to light. Some of the topics are more somber or historically significant, like the spot that many Dakota people believe to be the center of the earth, and the humble little commemorative plaza that honors the legendary African-American neighborhood that was destroyed by the building of Interstate 94. And some of the topics are very lighthearted, like the world's largest stucco snowman and a giant farmhouse loaded with giant European organs. But all the stories have two things in common. They all have a rich backstory and a deep local tie. Those are my requirements as I decided what to include in the book. And that's really proving to be very lucky, because the deep local ties are what's making these places preserved through COVID, you know? And I mean, they're not places that are just gonna go away. So that's kind of turned out well. It's still relevant, even after COVID. Anyway, this book was released March 15th, 2020, the exact week that our city was shutting down and my kids' schools shut down the same week. Boxes and boxes of this book showed up at my front door. And I thought to myself, I just basically shoved them in a corner and said, oh my gosh, who is gonna want to buy a travel guide? I just like, what am I gonna do with these things now? And but amazingly, despite my book launch getting canceled and every single event that I had lined up, dozens of book signing events, everything was canceled and not rescheduled yet. It's done amazingly well. Coincidentally, it features a lot of places that are great for social distancing. And come late May, people were just starving for something like this. Ideas of what am I going to do with my kids this summer, right? Last summer, and I started selling like hotcakes. It did very, very well, and stayed up on #1 of Minnesota guides for several months.
Cool.
Anyway, I got free reign with this book. I got to put whatever I wanted in it, and I got to take all the photographs. However, I did ask my good friend Deborah Bernard. She took the center full page photographs. I just took the rest all with my little iPhone, including the ones on the cover. This van I'll talk about is from Hot Sam's Antique Park. That's my dream hippie van. We'll be talking about that site today. This bouquet is actually giant. It's a bus stop in North Minneapolis with a neat story. This is, of course, the dove from the Prince mural in Uptown. I could not write a book on weird, wonderful, and obscure in the Twin Cities without writing about our Prince, right? And then this is this rock is really tucked away in St. Cloud, and it overlooks the city of St. Paul. Its back is towards the street, hidden by bushes and trees. It's fun to go find, but it was part of a rock symposium in 2006 in Duluth, where rock carvers from all of the world came together to celebrate Minnesota rock, which is some of the oldest in the world. And they all were given rock to create a carving. And this is one of them. There's several of them all throughout St. Paul. They're kind of fun to go on a scavenger hunt and find them. But anyway, I think I'll start with reading the introduction, and then we'll cut to the slideshow. Thousands of years ago, melting glaciers and an ancient waterfall began carving the way for the eventual development of two great cities on the banks of the upper Mississippi. Although one grew up mostly on the east side of the river and the other mostly on the west side, the two cities became tagged as twins. We all know that twins is a bit of a misnomer, though. For one thing, Minneapolis is cosmopolitan, while St. Paul prefers a more laid-back, old-world existence. But as you get to know each city's unique endeavors and little-known spots, it's clear their gene pools are equally extraordinary and quirky. Of course, cities are nothing without their people. As we read through the vignettes in the pages ahead, you'll gain glimpses of all kinds of folks, from early immigrants walking with suitcases through a hidden tunnel, to creatives pouring their souls into giant sculptures, to beer lovers sitting on stools buying $1 meat raffle tickets, to Jane Austen fans taking selfies with a life-size cutout of Colin Firth. Heck, you might even get a glimpse of yourself. I've called the Twin Cities home most of my life, but I've never truly appreciated the wealth of history and hidden gems to be found here until now. This guidebook, which includes the surrounding suburbs, stems from a year's worth of researching, circling destinations on my big crinkly map, taking exits I've never taken, exploring new and familiar places for a closer look, reaching out to local experts from archivists to bartenders, and finally learning the backstories of places and oddities I've driven by countless times. I'm no Twin Cities know-it-all, but one thing I know for certain is this: it's impossible to run out of stuff to marvel over and be surprised about in this 2-for-1 metropolis. All right, let me take one more sip of water and we'll hope this slideshow comes up. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna make it full screen. So just a second here. All right. I'm trying to get this up here. There we go. Slideshow. Okay, y'all see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for those of you who have the book, you'll recognize this picture in the introduction page, but I didn't write anything about this. I was just very proud of this picture, and I included it in the introduction for a couple of reasons. I was standing on the inner city bridge at the time, otherwise known as the Ford Parkway Bridge, and I took the photo, obviously through the spindles as I stood there. This bridge connects Minneapolis and St. Paul. It crosses the river, Mississippi River, at its widest and deepest point in the Twin Cities. And I wanted to include it because it highlights the river, which I believe is the heart and soul of the Twin Cities. Although we haven't always been kind to it, it truly is the reason our cities exist, and with great and complicated cultures existing beside it long before Europeans arrived. This is a picture of that same bridge from a distance. On the Minneapolis side, on the west side there is Minnehaha Park, and on the St. Paul side is Highland Park, the Highland Park neighborhood where Charles Schultz grew up, and where there's a golf course with a bunker on the 15th hole in the shape of Snoopy. This bridge is also a great place to begin and end one of the most popular and most historic biking loops in the Twin Cities, the 22-mile loop. You can learn more about that loop and how to get there and how to follow it at midwestweekends.com. It describes that biking loop in detail. Midwestweekends.com, you just search Twin Cities history ride and you'll find it. Anyway, I've had many people tell me how surprised to learn from this book that St. Paul is home to the world's largest light bright. And it's even more fun to learn that it's mounted to a wall inside a historic train station. But before I talk about the light bright, I want to talk about the train station for a minute. Union Depot, as the station is called, is located in Lower Town of St. Paul. It's open to the public to roam around, and it's actually been the closest thing to a museum that has been open all throughout COVID. I was there around the holidays just to get out of the house, and I practically had the entire thing to myself. Originally completed in 1926 and fully restored in 2012 after a 4-decade absence of passenger trains, it is a dazzling, classically detailed 5-story building that has become a community hub for things like Bloody Mary festivals and massive yoga classes. Prior to COVID, every Wednesday, they'd also set out giant games, all your favorite games like chess, checkers, Connect Four, and dominoes, like giant versions of them that you could go and play. And hopefully that'll come back soon as we get through this pandemic. Anyway, back to the light bright. It looks like a stained glass window. It was created in 2013 to kick off a campaign called Forever St. Paul. It challenged residents to submit their best and brightest answers to the question, what would you do with $1 million to make St. Paul great? The design is a mosaic that contains the word Forever St. Paul. And if you look closely, you'll find images of city landmarks, including the Mounds Park, the Capitol Dome, the First Bank, and Sparky, the former Como Park Zoo's sea lion. But I have not been able to find Sparky. The mural was designed by this guy, Tecumseh Aiken. He's a veteran of large-scale public art installations in the Twin Cities. He's also mentioned in another story in the book about a series of 7 shadows that are embedded in the pavement on Nicollet Mall. in Minneapolis that he and another artist created to honor 7 people who represent a vital part of the city's history. After Tacumba came up with the design, hundreds of people volunteered. They came together to sort out 800 pounds of mixed up pegs. They were all jumbled up, and they had to hand sort them into, into their 8 color buckets. And then they inserted 600,000 round pegs into the holes. And the Twin Cities Pioneer Press quoted Aiken as saying, "It was wonderful seeing people come together. It was like having a big pallet, but the pallet was the people, not the pegs anymore." One of the places I've come to appreciate the most during my research for this book was the confluence of the Mississippi and Minnesota rivers located on Pike Island inside Fort Snelling State Park. This is known as a deeply sacred spot to the Dakota people who call it Bedote. It is without a doubt one of the most powerfully historic places in the Twin Cities. To European settlers, the spot and the vast area around it became the center of trade and military authority. But to many Dakota people, this area is believed to be the center of the earth and their place of origin. As Gwen Westerman and Bruce White wrote in their incredibly detailed book, The Land of Makoche, Minnesota Makoche, the Land of Dakota. This Bedote is where Dakota people came from the stars to be on the earth. The oral account that is most widely held in this region is that the spirits of the people came down the spirit road made up of the stars of the Milky Way. And when they arrived on earth, the creator shaped the first people from the clay of Mother Earth at this confluence. But this area also represents an extremely dark chapter in Minnesota history, which is represented by this memorial on the edge of the parking lot just before hiking out onto Pike Island. This area is where 1,600 Dakota people, many of them women and children, were imprisoned outside during the winter in the aftermath of the 1862 US-Dakota conflict before being deported out of Minnesota that spring. At least 130 of them died during the cold months of captivity. There's a sign at the memorial that explains briefly, but I also include a website where you can listen to the Dakota voices talking about the significance of the site before you go, and it will make your visit that much more meaningful. There are 2 different ways to get to the confluence. Either pay for the sticker at Fort Snelling State Park, or you can park for free above at Fort Snelling and climb down. And you'll get to this footbridge. And if you go left, that takes you along the Mississippi River. If you go right, it takes you along the Minnesota River. It's a 3-mile loop around. And there are many other trails in the park. This area often gets flooded, so you want to check the Fort Snelling State Park website before you go to make sure there's no flooding. Sweet Hollow, in my opinion, is one of the most storied gems in all of the Twin Cities. It's a lush valley hidden 120 feet below street level. And for nearly 100 years, from the 1860s to the 1950s, it was an immigrant shantytown where various immigrant groups lived and found camaraderie. First came the Swedes and Poles, then the Italians and Mexicans. After arriving in St. Paul by train, they'd walk with their suitcases and enter through this tunnel. This tunnel is tucked away, mostly out of sight, near Hope Academy off Payne Avenue. This is what it used to look like down there. No electricity, no stores, no plumbing. They built outhouses on top of the creek. In 1956, the city declared the area a health hazard, evacuated the remaining families, and burned it all down. There's an opera written about that travesty, and it debuted down there after it became a park. In the 1970s, it was cleaned up and turned into a park, and that's what it looks like down there now. You still see a few remnants as you stroll around. It is so quiet down there because you are below the city. It is so quiet. You can almost feel the life that was so vital down there below. It's just hard to believe there's a city above you when you're down there. Through Sweet Hollow runs the Bruce Bainto Regional Trail. If you go north, you'll pass the Hams Brewery there, the old dilapidated Hams Brewery, where that houses now some quirky businesses, including a trapeze school that I feature in the book. If you go the other direction, south, you'll pass through the 7th Street improvement arches here. It's all beautiful and graffitied in there. There's a really cool picture of it in the center insert, the full color center insert in the book that my friend Deb took. And if you go through this under this tunnel, you're going to pass by the Bruce Bento Nature Sanctuary, which is a work in progress. It's full of historical plaques and bluffs, wildflowers, old train structures, and caves. This cave is blocked off. It's known as the Walk-on Teepee Cave. Some people refer to it as Carver's Cave, but the original name, the Dakota name, is Walk-on Teepee Cave. And that means dwelling place of the sacred in the Dakota language. And there's actually a Walk-on Teepee Center being built here at the sanctuary right now. I don't know if COVID slowed it down. It was scheduled to be completed this fall. And the goal of that center is to help fill a gap in American Indian education in Minnesota and encourage people to honor and care for our natural places and the sacred sites and culture value within them. Really, really interesting place. I guess I wouldn't go there by myself. There, you know, there's people walking around. Take somebody with you. Going up to the top of the Poche building, Poche Tower is something I've been doing since I was in high school. My friends and I would go and ride the elevators up and down. In 1929, William B. Poche realized a childhood dream by building a skyscraper in the image of the Washington Monument as headquarters for his utilities company. He even had his name embellished on every side of it with 10-foot tall letters. At 447 feet, the Poche Tower was the tallest building in the Midwest for 48 years. And it's now, of course, the hotel. The elevators take you to the 30th floor where the museum, the Poche Museum, is located. A very, very cool place. And if you go a couple more flights of stairs, you'll get to the observation deck where you can take in the 365-degree views of downtown Minneapolis and views of the river. I've always remembered this photograph from my visits up to the museum and history books too. This is a photograph of the naked statue named Scherzo that Poche hired famed sculptor Harriet Frismuth to create as a centerpiece for the tower's 3-day opening extravaganza that included fireworks and dancing girls and gold watches for guests. Unfortunately, Poche's empire collapsed soon after the celebration, partially due to the stock market crash and partially because he was busted for mail fraud and he went to prison. Well, in the process of working on this book, I asked a lot of questions. You know, where did that go? Or what if, and, you know, and one of the questions was, hey, I wonder where that statue went after the Poche closed. I don't know, that I just wondered that. And I started getting in chat rooms and it turns out I'm not the only one who was wondering that, you know, and then I saw Lost Twin Cities and they did a segment on it, but they said that they gave a little bit of history of a few places it went to after the Poche closed, but then the segment ended by saying it went into a private home and that was it. But that wasn't it. After that segment, some more things happened and it's now, much to my surprise, outdoors and somewhere where you can go view it. I'm not going to give it away. But I found it and I was so excited and it's the real thing. I verified that with the son of the man who bought it after it left the Poche Tower and had a good conversation with him on the phone. So anyway, that was an exciting moment. Here's Hot Sam's Antique Park. This is probably the one place I get asked about the most, probably because it's the first story in the book, but it's also the epitome of weird, wonderful, and obscure. But yeah, I chose to put it first in the book because it's pretty much equal distance to downtown Minneapolis and downtown St. Paul. And like I said, it's the epitome of what this book was all about. It's also the perfect example of something that I've driven by countless times. It's on the way to my sister's in Owatonna. It's You'll find it as you're heading towards the Twin Cities on I-35 near Lakeville. Anyway, I've driven by it countless times over the years, and you see these oddities up on a bankment on the side of the road, and you're like, what the heck is that? And I've never had time to stop by or take the exit and find out. I just kept going, and this gave me the excuse to stop. So there's spaceships, a giant guitar, big ladybugs. It's always changing. It's a revolving assortment. That guitar, by the way, was made from the Vikings hot tub at the Vikings training camp. Melted down and made into a guitar, but that has since been sold, unfortunately. But anyway, once you take the next exit and wind around this gravel road, you get to Hot Sam's Antique Park. There's a little antique shop, but it's like a 10-acre wonderland of the weird, I like to call it. But the owner, Jake, calls it his junkyard with a sense of humor. Scattered throughout are eclectic Hollywood-like props, like aliens and planes and spaceships, a hippie camp, gorillas. My favorite is the giant Tweety bird in a cage there. Oftentimes, theater groups do come and movie companies will rent these items or sometimes purchase them. I wrote a little anecdote in the book about the day that Jake, the owner, he's a real storyteller. He could care less he's in this book. He's such a passion for what he's doing, but he just loves telling stories. But he shared with me the day that Walter Matthau from Grumpy Old Men visited, because that was filmed here in the Twin Cities, and it's just a funny little story that I include in the book. This is Jake. He's still there working. That's his mom. He's a third-generation scrap collector. He created this place in 1985 as a gift for his mother there, Gladys. She passed away in 2010. She was also a scrap collector, but she was also a record-breaking race car driver who broke the land speed record at Daytona Beach in 1956 for a NASCAR powder puff. Later on, she helped care for her husband, who suffered brain damage. And so Jake built this for her as sort of a park for her, because they shared that passion of scraps and turning it into art. Anyway, I'm a big fan of Jake's. There's the hippie van that you see on the cover and me in it. I wanted to take off with it. It's easy for us locals to take the Minneapolis City Hall and the Hennepin County Courthouse for granted, but the building stands as one of downtown's most historic places and such a fascinating place to visit. And when I started on this project, I immediately knew that I wanted to use it as an excuse to get up into the clock tower, because I had heard there's a really cool room up there. And I'll show you that room in a minute here. The tower itself is 345 feet, and the clock is the largest four-face chiming clock in the world. Did you know? It's even larger. The face is larger than Big Ben's. The minute hand is 14 feet long and 350 pounds, just the minute hand. The building's 15 chime, bell chime, is the only American-made set that can play the Star Spangled Banner in the original key. And you could also hear it playing Prince songs the day after he died, all throughout Minneapolis. Until the US courthouse was built in 1996, it actually was impossible to hear the bells on the sidewalk below the tower. But now the sound bounces off the courthouse that was built and now can be heard on 4th Street, on the 4th Street side of City Hall. Volunteers used to have to climb up the 440 steps to play those towers on holidays and special occasions, but they're now played from a keyboard located in the rotunda. So Robert McCune, who manages the city records, took me up all the way up to right behind I stood right behind the clock there on the right. That's what looks like behind the clock. And he took me to that this special room that's located right below the clock and right above the city offices. So it's kind of tucked in that space, and it's 5,000 square feet, 6-tier room. And it's like the city's attic, really. I mean, nearly every inch of it is, consumed with shelves, with boxes of documents. that detail the city's history and government activities. Dozens and dozens of these giant, large, crinkly books with all the fire logs, with all the reasons for the fires, like, woman had a fit, careless with cigar stub, boys and matches. There are reasons for every reason why firefighters didn't turn up for work. There'd be the note kicked by horse. Volumes and volumes of files they kept on city criminals, including all their physical identifications, such as the color of their eyes, the shape of their chin, the tilt of their forehead, because they didn't have fingerprinting back then. Ear length, width and length of their heads. I love those big, giant, crinkly books. They crinkle as you turn the pages. Anyway, as you enter the city's hall main lobby off of 4th Street, you can't miss the Father of Waters statue. If it was standing straight up, it would be 15 feet tall, weighs 14,000 pounds. And the Minneapolis legend is if you rub the toe, you'll have good luck. I'm sure you're not allowed to rub the toe right now. But beautiful building with stained glass windows. And there's a set of gargoyles that line the elevators there, and they each have a funny face. For some reason, I always tell people look for the one sticking on his tongue. His name is Raz. The pavilion shown here is the focal point of a new China Friendship Garden located at Phelan Park in St. Paul. The pavilion was gifted to St. Paul by Changsha China in 2018 in celebration of their 30-year anniversary of their sister city relationship. I'll tell you what St. Paul gave to them in exchange in a minute. This garden, the first of its kind in the United States, is a year-round oasis of weeping willows, lakes, streams, among cultural plazas and the works. This garden is meant to not only honor Minnesota's 35,000 Chinese immigrants and their descendants, but also the 80,000 Hmong who live in the state and claim Changsha China as their ancestral home. There it is in the winter, gorgeous place all year long. Inside and throughout the exterior of the pavilion, you'll find Hmong heritage symbols, including dragons and totems and hand-painted Chinese plum blossoms representing perseverance and resilience. In exchange for this gorgeous pavilion, St. Paul gave to Changsha China a set of 5 Peanuts character sculptures, 1 Lucy, 1 Charlie Brown, 1 Linus, and 2 Snoopies. The Lucy is dressed in a traditional Hmong dress, and the Snoopy doghouse is painted with Minnesota state symbols, loons and trees, and a Chinese brush style part painting. These statues, of course, symbolize St. Paul, the birthplace of Charles Schulz. And they bring a bit of our Minnesota Hmong and Minnesota Chinese culture with them. The statues are now installed in a state-of-the-art science museum in China. While you're there by the picnic shelter is this sculpture called Meditation. And this is another one of those stone sculptures throughout St. Paul, like that face on the cover. This is one of the most interesting and underrated museums in the Twin Cities, the Bakken Museum. Right now, they have a brand new entrance. I don't have a picture of it yet. That face it's located right on formerly known Lake Calhoun, now Lake Baide-Makaska. It's located in a historic mansion. It's the world's only museum and library devoted primarily to the use of electricity in the medicine and science fields. The museum is named for Earl Bakken, the Twin Cities engineer who invented the first wearable external battery-powered pacemaker and co-founder of Medtronic, the world's largest medical device manufacturing company. For anyone with a passion for inventions in STEM, the Bakken Museum is filled with historic scientific instruments, a science library, and lots of interactive activities. Earl Bakken was 8 years old in 1931 when he saw the movie Frankenstein and became fascinated with the connection between electricity and life. He watched it over and over and over again. Then about 25 years later, on Halloween night of 1957, a Minneapolis power outage caused the death of a baby dependent on a bulky tabletop plug-in pacemaker. In response, Bakken, who at the time was an electrical engineer, was asked to devise a battery-powered pacemaker, small enough to tape to a patient's chest. This was a major turning point in medicine. Bakken, who died at age 94, in 2018, became a beneficiary of his own invention. One of my favorite things to do at this museum is to go see the Mary and Her Monster exhibit. This is where you learn about what inspired Mary Shelley to write her novel, Frankenstein, which was published in the 1800s when she was just 21 years old. She was a fascinating woman who challenged conventions and overcame obstacles. There's actually a living portrait of her there, that exhibit that you push and she talks.
I'm in
Also
a
part of-
meeting. I'll call you back in about half an hour.
Also part of that exhibit is Frankenstein's laboratory. Once you go in, there's a brief sort of play that begins with a very surprising ending that might make you scream like it did me. I won't give anything away. Luckily, I had the whole thing to myself because I screamed really loud. That doesn't take much though. If you're from the Twin Cities, you've no doubt been to Minnehaha Regional Park, possibly many times. Its waterfall was memorialized by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow in his epic poem, The Song of Hiawatha. But what many might not know is that it also used to be home to an exotic zoo on the northwest side. It opened in 1906 and closed in 1934. But there's still 3 remnants of it. First of all, I'll show you, this is a picture of the zoo. It was opened by this guy, Robert Fish Jones. People called him Fish because he brought oysters. He was from the East Coast and he opened up a shop on Hennepin Avenue, a fish market, where it was the only place you could get oysters at the time. He was a huge animal lover. He opened up a zoo, but where the Basilica now stands, but then he moved it to Minnehaha Creek. He was a huge Longfellow fan and built a statue made of Longfellow, the poet that's back there. That statue still stands there. This is all that's left of the zoo there. There's Longfellow standing all by himself in the prairie. And the Longfellow home that he built there is now a Minnesota School of Botanical Art. The third remaining memento of that zoo are the remains of Hiawatha. Hiawatha was the zoo's crowd favorite. He and Fish had a very close relationship, so much so that when Hiawatha died in 1920, Fish had him made into a rug, which is preserved now in storage at Hennepin History Museum. Gosh, it's later than I thought. You think I should wind it up here?
It's only 1/4
We go till 12:30, is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
A couple more places.
yeah, it's really fascinating. So I'm like, no, don't stop. Keep
Okay,
going.
it's hard to gauge, hard to know.
I know.
Maybe one of the most peculiar and difficult places to understand that I visited is Capone Art Park in Eagan. It's a 60-acre parcel of land purchased in 1949 by the late Anthony Capone, a former art teacher at Macalester College, who died at the age of 94 in 2015. Capone was born in a tiny mountain village in Italy, and the rugged surroundings had a deep impact on him and profound influence on his work. After building a house on this land and raising 6 children there, he devoted the rest of his life to transforming his gigantic backyard into a public art park. Using a shovel, wheelbarrow, and a bobcat, he molded the land into a unified whole of rocks, trees, rolling wooded hills, meandering trails, embedded with very peculiar art that you can easily miss if you're not paying attention. The park is split into 2 sections. The main section includes an outdoor amphitheater shown here called the Theater of the Woods, where you can enjoy theater and dance performances in the summer. And the other side is a sculpture garden. You access it by walking through a tunnel that goes under Diffley Road. And it opens up to this very strange sculpture garden that seems very sparse at first because if they're not apparent, things are meant to blend with the landscape. You have to kind of look for it. This giant snake is built into a hill. It has the head of a rattlesnake and the body of an anaconda. Another highlight in that sculpture garden is this retaining wall. It represents the victims of a volcanic eruption that buried the ancient Roman city of Pompeii. Capote kind of imagined that their bodies were huddled together, and like an archaeological dig, only part of the subject is visible. You're meant to imagine the rest of them underneath the hill. Here's another image or angle of that strange carving into the wall. Some of the sculptures, it's not exactly kid friendly. Some of the sculptures make you feel like you should turn the other way. Yeah, so interesting place. They do golf cart tours. It's such a big park. You can go there with friends and get driven around on a golf cart if you want. Lindale Park Peace Garden is one of those places where there's way more than meets the eye, right? There always is more than meets the eye. Formerly called the Rock Garden. This was designated in 1999 as an international peace site because of the remembrance of the horrific atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945. The key piece to this garden is the Peace Bridge. It's shaped in a zigzag. And again, like I said, my job during writing this book was to ask questions. And my question was, why is this a zigzag? And I was fortunate to get to interview the architect of it. We had a nice conversation. He even let me include an excerpt from his journal in the book. But it's a zigzag because Japanese believe that evil spirits only travel in straight lines. So therefore they can't follow you into the garden if you go enter it across this bridge. Something also that sets this bridge apart that's easy to miss is that each end of the bridge has a stone pillar from ground zero of the atomic bomb blast in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You can see the one from Hiroshima right there. Actually, in 2009, representatives of both Nagasaki and Hiroshima met with representatives of the Twin Cities in the center of this bridge and shook hands. Lots of weddings take place on this bridge as well. Right next to that bridge is this 14-foot sculpture crane. It's a crane. It's called the Spirit of Peace. The sculpture honors a young girl who died from leukemia from the radiation of those bombs, from the bomb in Hiroshima. Before she died, she was determined to fold 1,000 paper cranes, symbolizing her hope for peace. There's stones that circle the sculpture, and each one gives the directions in order to how to fold a paper crane. And nearby is a little box with square papers where you can fold your own paper crane. Instructions are kind of fading. You have to have really good eyesight to read them at this point. But anyway, get close. I'm not gonna go into the story of this Rock Island Swing Bridge, a magical place to go in Inver Grove Heights. I had the whole thing to myself. It's a bridge that only goes halfway across the Mississippi River. All kinds of things have happened to it over the years. It's caught on fire, parts of it fell off. John Dillinger got chased across it by the FBI. But now it's just a bridge that with an end cap that stops halfway across the river. It's preserved. That's what I love about it, that the residents fought to preserve it. And now you can sit out there on the rock and watch the boats go by. Really beautiful, beautiful spot. It's a historic place with relics of the bridge parts that have fallen off. You can climb up a stairway to get kind of an aerial view there. And I'll just end here with that fun bus stop. I'm kind of obsessed with this bus stop. It's in North Minneapolis. And if you go, it's right across from the cookie cart. That's also in my book. You can go get cookies and help support the youth of North Minneapolis. It's a place where they can go, a safe place for them to go and work and learn important job skills. And so right across the street. All right, well, I will stop sharing here. Yeah. Any questions? I know my time is almost up here.
Gillette has one.
Okay.
Actually, I have a Wadena connection for you to Mr. Bakken.
Oh.
one of the early investors for his for Medtronic was Mr. Maslowski, who I lent him some money, and in return, Bakken gave him shares in his company. And he was like, sure, I'll take shares. And of course, you know, the company went and made a lot of money, and they're one of the investors that gave money to Wadena for the Research and Wellness Center. It's the Maslowski
Wow.
Research and Wellness that we built after the tornado took out our community center in 2010.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. It's always a connection.
Always.
Yes.
So, okay, Tony,
Oop.
you're muted.
Tony's muted.
Now I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes. A very close friend of my husband's and mine worked for Control Data,
Oh,
and both my daughters graduated from CSB.
really? Again, small world.
Thank you.
Thanks
Um,
for sharing.
I have a question. What was your most favorite place of all the places that you went to research the book?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the places I would return to over and over again are the ones along the Mississippi River. You know, there's a few places. Nicollet, you know, Nicollet Island is a really, I didn't show pictures of that, but that's such great history and such cool homes. You feel like you're back in time as you wander around in the graffiti bridges, and it connects to rock, to Boom Island, and to the bird sanctuary park right next to it. I really, really love Nicollet Island, but I also loved the Washburn Park water tower. It's weird to think that a water tower was one of my favorite places. It's in Tangletown in Minneapolis, completely hidden. This huge water tower with eagles and guardians of health carved around it, and it's totally hidden until you drive right up to it because it's in Tangletown. It's like tangled in a neighborhood. Super duper cool. Very amazing thing to bring a guest to go see.
Cool. I'm looking forward to going to the places in your book. It made me go, oh, I'm so close. I
Yeah.
can take a vacation and it's only like 45 minutes away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gillette?
Yes. So I'm wondering, because it's a travel guide. So what's your process for writing? I mean, do you write every day? Do you map out your day and say, or your week or your month, or say, this is what I'm going to do my research on, and set up your interviews? And how do you, for this kind of reporter style writing, how do you organize your time and get yourself started and keep yourself going?
Yeah. Well, I was given only 1 year to write this book and turn in all the photographs, and before then the editing and the design process went on for about 7 months, but 1 year to turn it all in. So it was a mad dash. I divided the year up month. How many did I need to finish per month? And I kept to that. But I visited all these places. I wanted to write from firsthand experience. So I also went to all these places throughout that year. But I wanted to research first. I wanted to learn as much as I could about each place before I went, because then when I did visit, I truly felt like I was in the presence of greatness every time I went to these places, because I knew the history, and it was just like, I was so excited to go every time. And so that's what I would kind of write a draft, and then I would visit, and then I would rewrite it based on what I experienced. So that's kind of worked really well for me. And I did make, I wanted to make sure I was also, obviously very important for me to get everything accurate. So I did find kind of an expert for each topic to connect with and review what I wrote to ensure that I had it all accurate. So I was able to, I mean, some of the places didn't lend itself to that. But 90% I was able to touch base with kind of an expert on that particular place or topic.
Was there anywhere that you went that was disappointing or underwhelming, or that you ended up not adding into the book because it just wasn't all that, or something like that?
There were just some places that I initially had in the book, and then I was like, and I'm glad, because I didn't feel as though they were going to last. Like I didn't think they'd be around. It didn't have the local tie that so there was a water bar, and then I pulled that out at the last minute, and good thing, because it already closed up. And there was a couple quirky art studios. They're just not going to be around, I don't think, for much longer. So, but other than that, no, I never felt disappointed.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that had to be hard, writing a travel book and then having it come out right before the pandemic, like that week.
Yeah, I thought this is doomed, but I think it actually helped it. Hate to say it, but it probably did, because people were it was just well suited for it, coincidentally. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems, when you can't travel and you're stuck, particularly for all the people who live in the Minneapolis, St. Paul or surrounding areas, it was something to do, especially in the summer with your kids. It seemed like some of these places.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of places are indoor museums and things that are now reopening, but they were closed. So that was a bummer that people couldn't take advantage of those right away, but now they can. And in the meantime, there were a lot of outdoor places in the book, so it worked out okay.
What's the best way to get one of your books?
I sell them out of my house as a little business at secrettwincities.com. I sign those, but otherwise they're all over. You guys, right? I mean, you can, they're on Amazon. They're at most little bookstores, Barnes and Noble, online at Target, and
Gillette and Travel and Story Seller, and she has them, I believe, at the Wadena County Historical Society, Gillette. So they're there.
Yes,
So
I just put a
local
chat
bookstores.
out there that, they should be in, you can order through the Historical Society. If you order on the Travel and Story Seller website and you pick WCHS as your delivery method, then you can just pick it up at the Historical Society. And Lina, what is the future plans for the museum gift shop being open?
We'll be open by appointment. So not to the general public yet, but if you call and make an appointment, you can come. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So lots of options out there.
Yeah.
As with all things in the 21st century, you have many options with where you want to spend your money and what organizations you want to support with the dollars. Right, Julie?
Yes.
Well, I'm hoping that once this is all over, maybe we can have all the authors gather in Wadena so we can all meet them and have them sign all the books and everything. That's been the hardest part. I mean, this is great because it's convenient and intimate, but it's sort of fun to get to go and meet the author and buy the book right there and have you sign it. And that part I miss.
Yeah.
I'm already planning for that.
Oh, cool. All right. Anybody have any other questions? Nobody? Well, thank you so much. I am actually looking forward to, if I ever get a day off, going to some of these places, because it sounds fascinating, because some are just like, oh, the same old touristy things, but these made it look like you were far away from the city. Some of the parks and everything just seem hidden, I guess.
Yeah, obscure, definitely.
Yes.
There's a lot of nostalgia in this book too. If you grew up in Minnesota, you'll appreciate the book even more than a tourist. There's There's things that only Minnesotans are going to understand.
And I mentioned earlier to Julie that we have a little pamphlet that says Secrets of Wadena, which wasn't reprinted last year, but now I'm inspired to make it a guidebook. so that would be fun.
Should.
Thank
you
you,
plan-
Julie. Great.
Yeah. Do you plan to
Thank
do a
you.
sequel?
Well, like I said, I'm working on another book now, but it's a different kind of book, more on historic treasures versus secret.
Okay.
So,
No, but
yep.
yeah, that's cool.
yeah,
Awesome.
it'll have 90 more places.
Awesome.
different.
Awesome.
Well, we look forward to having you back again to talk about that one.
Yeah,
Yes,
that'd be great.
absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.